Hello, and welcome to California Gun Law. I'm your host, Don Hammond, with an update on the status of California's dreaded 11% excise tax on firearms and ammunition. This became law with Assembly Bill 28, which took effect January 1st, 2024. Since then, one lawsuit was filed and dismissed, and now another lawsuit has been filed, and the state has filed a demurrer asking the court to dismiss that case. On my other videos, I always get comments asking about the status of this 11% tax on guns. So let's dig into the status. I'm a licensed California attorney and a shooting instructor. I regularly help teach the 16-hour class that's required to get a concealed carry license in California. On this program, we provide education on California's complicated web of gun laws so that responsible gun owners can better understand how to lawfully exercise their rights. California has a complicated web of firearms laws and regulations, and there are lots of traps for the unwary. We want to help you do it right so that you won't need our criminal defense legal services. Today, let's dig into a hot topic: California's 11% excise tax on the purchase of firearms and ammunition. This tax was enacted by Assembly Bill 28, which took effect on July 1st, 2024. So we've been living with it for almost a year and a half now. This 11% tax is in addition to state and local sales taxes. Immediately after the law took effect, the next day, CRPA filed a lawsuit against the state of California to try to invalidate the tax. That case was called James versus Maduros. Because of some procedural issue, that case was dismissed earlier this year in 2025. After fixing some issues, the CRPA filed a new case in August of 2025 called Poway Weapons and Gear, Inc. versus California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. The case is being heard in Sacramento County Superior Court, not in federal court like many of the Second Amendment lawsuits that we see. It was recently assigned to a different judge, and a key hearing is scheduled for July 21st, 2026. The lawsuit challenges the constitutionality of the 11% excise tax. The plaintiffs allege that the tax is unconstitutional because it impacts people's right to bear arms under the Second Amendment, and there is no historical analog to such a tax. Additionally, the plaintiffs argue that constitutional rights cannot be singled out for taxation. This argument is based on a series of First Amendment cases where taxes and fees have been struck down. Plaintiffs point out that the Second Amendment is not a second-class right, as the Supreme Court said in the Bruin case back in 2022. And since 1819, the Supreme Court has also held that the power to tax is the power to destroy. So if the state can impose additional taxes on exercises of the Second Amendment, then the state has the power to destroy individuals' ability to exercise their Second Amendment rights, and that would be unconstitutional. On October 27th, the state filed a demurrer to the complaint. A demurrer is a fancy motion to dismiss, claiming that the plaintiffs have failed to state a viable cause of action. In ruling on a demurrer, a judge has to assume that all of the facts in the complaint are true and determine as a legal issue whether the plaintiffs have standing and whether the causes of action are valid. The demurrer that the state has filed alleges that the tax does not meaningfully constrain the rights of individuals to keep and bear arms commonly used for self-defense. Therefore, the lawsuit fails at the first step of the Bruin analysis. The state characterizes the excise tax as a tax on retailers who are selling firearms rather than on individuals who are buying firearms, and they argue that the Second Amendment does not protect a right to sell firearms without paying additional taxes. They say that selling is not included in the right to keep and bear arms, as that term is defined by the United States Supreme Court in the Heller case. The state also argues that the 11% tax does not actually impact anyone's decision as to whether to buy a gun or whether a gun is affordable for the average person. Now, this seems incorrect as a matter of simple economics. I learned in high school that supply and demand impacts the market. If prices go up for any product, then people buy less of that product. I don't see why guns would be any different. However, I do still see a lot of people buying guns when I visit local gun stores. And my friends who work at those stores tell me that business is booming even with the 11% additional tax. Interestingly, the demurrer only argues that the case fails at the first stage of the Bruin analysis, which is whether it implicates the Second Amendment at all. The state makes no argument regarding the second stage of the analysis, which is whether there's a sufficient historical analog to this tax. If the case survives the demurrer, they'll surely argue that issue when the case gets to the merits and motions for summary judgment and possibly a trial. The next step in the case is for the plaintiffs to file an opposition to the demurrer, and the demurrer hearing is set for July 21st, 2026. So it will be quite a while before we get a ruling on the merits of the case and maybe get out from under this 11% additional tax on firearms and ammunition. I, for one, am avoiding buying new guns while this 11% tax is in effect. We probably won't get a final ruling from the Superior Court until at least sometime in 2027. Then the case may be in the appellate courts for a few more years. Fortunately, the tax doesn't apply to private party transfers, so I'm able to get some cowboy action guns for my wife and I's new hobby. And I'm starting to reload ammo, so I'll avoid the tax on ammo for the foreseeable future. What do you think? Are you avoiding purchasing new firearms while this tax is in effect? Has it priced you out of being able to exercise your Second Amendment rights? Let us know in the comments. And head over to cagun.law for legal updates. And while you're there, be sure to pick up some cool merch to support the cause. I'm Don Hammond of California Gun Law. Stay informed, stay legal, stay safe.